This is our health officials writing guidelines on this. I'm not making this up. They've said you've got to social distance in your bedrooms, you've got to wear masks, you've got to masturbate, and to even be safer, you should masturbate and do all of this via the internet. Do it with your partner via Zoom or Skype.
Evelyn, I'm speechless. I have no words for what you're saying. It's unbelievable.
Yep, masturbation is the only safe form of sex, and do it via the internet with a mask on.
Whilst it is in human nature to engage in conversation with others, to be friendly, unfortunately, this is not the time to do that. So even if you run into your next door neighbour in the shopping centre, in the Coles, whilst you're at Coles or Woolworths or Aldi or any other grocery shop, don't start up a conversation.
Welcome to our show, Evelyn Rae from Australia Live. Your country, Australia, has gone in lockdown again. Military on the street, mask wearing everywhere. And as we saw, Chief Health Officer Dr. Carrie Chan said, don't start up a conversation in a local grocery shop. This is not the time to be friendly. She speaks of a single death and 78 local cases in a population of 25 million people. Evelyn, is this really happening? Because in the Netherlands, we thought it was a joke.
No, it would appear like a joke because of how illogical it is, but sadly, it is the reality that all of us Australians are currently living in at the moment.
So they're locking up the country because of one single death.
Well, so we have had since the beginning of the pandemic a total of 924 deaths, but 909 of those deaths were in 2020. So this year in itself, we have had, not very many COVID-related deaths. So, yeah, you would think based on the amount of restrictions and the implementation of the government over here that it would be a larger number. But in almost 2 years since we've been in the pandemic, we have only had 927 deaths.
We saw Dr. Carrie Chan speaking on television, and she was talking about don't start a conversation. This is not the time to be friendly. We've been laughing a lot about this scene, but are there Australian people taking this really seriously, or are people in Australia also taking a laugh of it? What is the sentiment in your country?
I think there is actually, sadly, a large group of people in Australia who are taking it seriously. Some of the health officers have said, do not even talk to your neighbours. We've had health officers say, if you attend a football game and the football goes into the stadium, do not touch the ball, basically run away from the ball. And unfortunately, at the moment, our law enforcement over here in Australia is being plagued with thousands upon thousands of calls every single day from neighbours dobbing in their neighbours. I come from a law enforcement background. I served for 12 years over here. So I have a lot of connections, and some of my friends who are still currently serving in the police have told me that they get up to 5,000 calls per day with people in Australia dobbing on other people in Australia.
And there's also police and military on the street. Let's look at a clip.
The Army will take to Sydney streets and police will go door to door in hotspot suburbs after the city recorded its worst day of the pandemic so far. Huge surge in cases has seen 239 new infections. 88 of those people were infectious in the community at some point. In a compliance crackdown, fines have been dramatically increased for not wearing a mask, and there are even stricter rules for 8 high-risk council areas, including a 5K travel limit. Across Sydney, police also have new powers to shut down businesses, construction sites and public spaces where there's a risk to public health. New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott joins me now. Minister, what role will the Army play? Because it is pretty intimidating when you see the Army roaming the streets. So what powers of entry do they and the police have? Has that changed?
No, that hasn't changed, but the military won't be going unattended. The military will be marrying up with police like they did in Victoria, and it shouldn't be intimidating. I mean, the military helped us through the bushfire crisis. They helped us here in New South Wales during the recent floods and storm activity at the beginning of the year. These are protocols that have been drafted over a quarter of a century ago, and you'd actually be surprised how regularly it's used.
Yeah, the police minister is claiming that it's not intimidating when the military is on the street. How do the Australian people experience this themselves?
Yeah, look, it certainly is an uneasy feeling. A lot of Australians do not understand the sort of powers that the Australian Defence Force have in comparison to a police officer. So it does feel very intimidating for the average Australian who doesn't understand the legalities of what they can and can't do. I understand that the Defence Force in Australia, they are only allowed to support the police, so they can do supportive roles, accompanying them, like they said, like a joint enterprise. But it is police who have the power to enforce. But your average Australian isn't fully aware of these things. So a lot of Australians, when they heard that 300 ADF personnel were being, implemented purely in Sydney, which is a city in New South Wales, a lot of people were scared. A lot of people felt really intimidated, and a lot of people sort of took it almost like a little bit of a threat, like who was flexing their muscles bigger in that particular situation. But yeah, this is where we're at. We have used the military before with lots of our bushfire crises, but back then, they were handing out water bottles and supporting firemen. But when they're supporting the police in an enforcement role, it does have a very intimidating feel amongst Australians over here.
And I saw there was also some advice about what kind of dinner you should cook and what you should buy or not. Let's look at the clip.
Good evening. COVID chaos is spreading across the East Coast tonight. Another testing station worker has caught the virus, forcing customers at a major northeast supermarket into isolation.
No Saturday morning shopping at Doncaster Woolworths. Customers turned away as the supermarket underwent a deep clean. The Chief Health Officer going as far as telling Queenslanders what's for dinner.
If you don't actually need that particular item of food, you're going to have to change whatever you're cooking, then please do that.
Yeah, unbelievable. A lot of hassle about 2 cases, and then they advise you what to cook at home. How did it come across in your country?
Yeah, that particular health minister has been one of the most confusing voices since the beginning of the pandemic. That particular health officer only a few days ago gave a press conference saying that if you have a medical reason which prevents you from being able to wear a mask, you have a lawful exemption, and you are also not double vaccinated, just to stay at home. Don't worry about your essential shopping, that you're too much of a risk. So you have a medical exemption to say that you can't physically wear a mask. You're not vaccinated, because most people in Australia at the moment aren't. Then bad luck. You can't do your essential shopping. And it's not law. She's literally just saying these things off the cuff in an attempt to try and just get Australians to stay home. And it was this very same health officer as well who, when the AstraZeneca vaccine rolled out in Australia, she also started coming out and telling young people, do not get this vaccine because of the blood clot risk. And then within a month of her making that statement, has now backflipped and said everybody needs to go out and get vaccinated or stay at home. So lots of people in Australia, when it comes to these health officials, we're just confused because they're constantly flip-flopping on the advice. What they're saying would not even pass your basic pub test. If you were sitting at a pub, having a drink with your mates and sharing a meal, it just doesn't make sense. And these things that they're saying are illogical. They lack all of the common sense factors, and all of us over here are just confused. And because we're confused, we don't know who to trust, we don't know what to believe, and then we're getting punished for being hesitant or cautious or asking questions. And right now in Australia, we're so divided because there are people over here who are just lapping up what these health officials are saying. They're taking it as gospel. And there's also a large group of us who can see straight through their hypocrisy, how illogical they are, and we're asking questions. And so there's almost two groups within Australia right now who are pitted against each other. There's huge segregation and division right now. But most of us who, have our heads screwed on right, listen to these health officials and can it's madness. It's complete madness.
The vaccination numbers in Australia are quite low compared to other countries. How willing are the Australians to be vaccinated in general?
At the moment, as it stands, only 16% of our entire population has been fully vaccinated. At the moment, the only two vaccines that we have available to us are the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer. And the Pfizer vaccine has only just hit our shores. But there's a real hesitancy right now because of all of the flip-flopping from the health officials. As I mentioned before, the Queensland health official basically came out with the AstraZeneca vaccine and said, that it was ill-advised for young people under 35 to get the vaccine because the risk of side effects are too great in comparison to the risk of COVID. After she said that, it was basically largely accepted across the entire of Australia that if you are a young person, do not get the AstraZeneca vaccine. So everybody didn't get it. And then from that particular point, the age limit changed because I think our government went, no one's taking the vaccine and all these things. And they actually changed it and made it even more stricter and basically said anybody under 50 shouldn't be getting this AstraZeneca vaccine. And then a week later again, they said anybody under 60 do not get the AstraZeneca vaccine. So pretty much anyone under 60, which is the largest number of people in Australia, don't get it. So we didn't have it really available to us. We were taking the advice of the health officials. Once the health officials realized nobody was taking the vaccine, they all had a freak out and they said, everybody can take the vaccine. There are risks, but it's okay. But we are phasing the vaccine out in October. So the AstraZeneca in Australia is actually completely getting phased out by October. And because of that, people in Australia are hesitant to get it because of all the statements that these health officials have made about it. So right now, all of us are kind of at a standstill. We have to be locked in our homes. We're not allowed to do things, but at the same time, a lot of us don't really want to get vaccinated because of all of the flip-flop with the health advice.
Okay, but apart from the flip-flop information, in Australia, only 910 people died of COVID, as far as it was COVID, but they had a positive test as well. How can that be qualified as a problem that forces everybody to be vaccinated?
Yeah, that's the big question. A lot of people in Australia think because we are an island and because we don't share borders with other countries, that's why our numbers are so good. But if we don't get vaccinated and the borders open up, we are going to be swamped under. We don't have enough medical resources. But our Prime Minister has actually come out, Scott Morrison, and has said to us, until at least 80% of the population are vaccinated, we are basically at a standstill. And these lockdowns are essentially going to be in effect until 80% of us are vaccinated. We've also been told by the Premier in New South Wales that until there are 0 active cases in the community, we're going to be locked in our homes. And at the moment, like 0 cases active in the community seems like an impossible goal or target to meet. It seems unrealistic, but that's what we've been told. And we've also been told, if you get vaccinated, if you make the choice to be vaccinated now, you will have a different set of rules to the non-vaccinated. I have a lot of friends in the nursing community over here who have been forced to get vaccinated to continue with their employment. And, they did that literally not because they wanted the vaccine, but because they could not afford to lose their job, their career, their medical career. So you got to pose the question, is this actually informed consent?
Evelyn, when we talk about informed consent, we also go to the subject of information, disinformation. And the editor-in-chief of the Daily Mail said something horrible about how they're dealing with information regarding anti-vaxxers.
And I know you will see a lot of comments on our stories from people who should know better. A lot of them are. I mean, we've been speaking in these conferences about anti-vaxxers and how it's extraordinary how many intelligent, otherwise well-educated people are spreading this disease really out there in the community. So it's just important we keep on top of it. Just remember with your stories to always, if we're doing something that is airing anti-vax views, make sure we're also dismissing them in the story. Is that the right way to put it? Dismissing them. Make sure your stories are rubbishing their ridiculous claims.
Yeah, to be clear, this was a leaked video, an internal video. Was this something that reached out to the mainstream media, or was it just on a viral level?
I think it was more on a viral level. There's like mass censorship right now in Australia on all of our mainstream media outlets. And this is what most of us Australians are upset about and have had enough of is, you know, you have mainstream media who are so focused on pushing an agenda and a narrative. We just don't know what the truth is. You know, if we believed the mainstream media, if we believed everything that they've been saying, we would think that they were tennis ball sized particles floating in the air that are going to kill us when they touch us. That's the sort of fear porn that they're putting all over the news. But, you know, like it was only the Daily Mail and a few other mainstream media outlets this last week who reported that a 27-year-old man in Australia died from COVID. And when this information hit the mainstream media, the family of this 27-year-old, as well as many friends who have known this man since before 2011, all came out and said he has a congenital heart disease. This particular man has, it's degenerative. You can't get better from it. And one day it's going to kill him. Everybody knew that this man had it. He was quarantining at home because he tested positive for COVID. On day 13 of his quarantine, his family have allegedly come out and said he tested negative for COVID. But when he was found, because previously he'd, you know, been tested as being positive just on a PCR test, they listed the death throughout the mainstream media as a COVID death. Did this man die of COVID, or did he die of his heart disease that he's carried for his whole life, that's hereditary, that goes through his family? His family have said that that's what they believe he died from. The mainstream media said he's died from COVID, and the family have just begged, please stop spreading that. We're waiting for the coroner to determine how he actually died. But before any of this, the mainstream media already jumped on it. A 27-year-old has died of COVID. And as a result of that, coming in mainstream media, lots of young people have then decided to go out and get vaccinated, because until this had happened, it was just mostly the elderly that had been affected by the COVID deaths. So when this happened, it was almost like an opportunity that couldn't be missed by certain narratives and agendas being pushed. And as a result of this, yeah, lots of young people have decided to go out and get vaccinated because they're scared they're going to be the next 27-year-old dying of COVID. So it's going to be very interesting once the coroner comes out and releases whether he did die of COVID or with COVID or without COVID, and just from a pure heart disease that he had unfortunately and sadly carried for his entire life.
Evelyn, winter is coming here in a few months in Europe. That's different in Australia, but how do you picture the near future in your country? What's going to happen?
Yeah, look, at the moment, I feel, unfortunately, and I don't mean to, you know, be the glass half empty person here, but I think we're going to be in and out of lockdowns for a long time. We have been here for over 18 months. And, you know, you said you're going into winter. We started off COVID during summer. So, you know, there was less sickness, less COVID-like symptoms like colds and coughs and sore throats and runny noses, all of those sorts of things. And then we endured winter and then summer, and now we're in the thick of winter again. But, you know, at the moment, Australia is dealing with the Delta variant, which is the new big scary monster that we're sort of being pushed in our faces. So after 18 months, we still haven't come up with another solution. We're still getting locked down every time there's one case of COVID. We're still being stuck in our homes, unable to travel more than 5 kilometers from our home. And after all this time, every time something happens, the government just does a snap lockdown again. And clearly the lockdowns are not working, because we're nearly 2 years into this and we're still in the same place as we were, if not worse than last year. And the way that the government have said that we are coming out of this mess is by vaccination. And we are only 16% vaccinated. So I can't see us really progressing out of this place until we are vaccinated. And that's the big question. Are we going to, or are we not going to get vaccinated? And if we're not, that's the $1 million question. Excuse me, not COVID. We have the government who have now gone into the bedrooms of couples. And there was an article that I wrote a little while ago where the government of New South Wales, the state of New South Wales, actually put out information on how couples need to have sex during COVID.
Serious?
Yeah, they said, I've written an article on it, I can send it to you. They've said that the best way to have sex during COVID is to masturbate with each other, but you have to social distance. They've actually written, the government, like, this is the health government, like this isn't even mucking, this is our health officials writing guidelines on this. I'm not making this up. They've said you've got to social distance in your bedrooms, you've got to wear masks, you've got to masturbate, and to even be safer, you should masturbate and do all of this via the internet. Do it with your partner via Zoom or Skype. That's safer. And so the government are literally imposing the pulpits of churches. They're imposing how we shop, what we eat, and they're imposing how we're supposed to be intimate with our partners. It's just mind-blowing to think that, the government are actually treating Australian people like this.
Evelyn, I'm speechless. I have no words for what you're saying. It's unbelievable. I thought it was already crazy to say don't be friendly in the grocery shop, but this blows my mind.
Yep. Masturbation is the only safe form of sex, and do it via the internet with a mask on. And obviously, someone who works for the government sent it to me, and I was like, wow, I can't believe this. And I actually wrote an article on it, had it published, and I had multiple people saying this is fake. I'm like, go to the website. And people went to the website and could not believe it. Wow, government health officials are telling people to do this. So,
Evelyn, I can't believe that I'm saying this, but I'm gonna say it. I feel blessed that I live in the Netherlands at this moment. I feel sorry for you and the Australians to be in this situation. I wish you all the best. And I hope to talk to you soon for another update. That would be great. Thank you so much for having me. We've been trying to use you guys as examples of what we could do moving forward, but they won't listen. But we'll keep trying, and I'd love to come back on and give you an update soon. Good luck. Thank you so much.